There, it's Travis Hyatt at Next Home Beyond here. I might have mentioned to you that we're going to have to go over a buyer agency agreement, and I wanted to just give you a quick video to give you kind of a synopsis of that. I'm going to share this with you so you can see it. Now, this one is going to be a little generic because I don't have all the information that we'll have when we get going. But this document basically we have to do before any and all showings. Outside of an open house, we have to do this. In Iowa, they changed the law on July 1st of 2024, and it's now required that before any showings, this is done. And it's not just because we want to lock you in and we're holding you hostage or anything like that. It's because we have to give what's known as informed consent, that you understand how we represent you as a buyer. So this is now required by law, and outside the open house now, and you don't have to sign this at an open house. So if another agent says, hey, sign in here, or then they make you sign this type of document or one that maybe their brokerage created, that is not required by law at this point. Now they might have you sign in just saying, hey, we know you came in, and if you're working with somebody like Travis at Next Home or whatever, that's fine, but not a formalized document like this one would be. So basically, it starts with the agreement between you and the brokerage, and it's always going to be the brokerage, not necessarily the agent. So in this case, Next Home Beyond. And then there's a couple different type of representation agreements. There's an exclusive and a non-exclusive. We at Next Home Beyond do the exclusive. The non-exclusive is basically, hey, you can work with as many brokers as you want. We like to keep it because we're going to keep your information personal and protected and confidential at all times. That way you don't have to worry about somebody saying, hey, guess what, they're willing to offer something else or whatever. With the exclusive relationship, it's we're working with you and for you on your behalf at all times, and vice versa with you working with us. It goes on to talk about the things and acknowledge that you're good with working exclusively. The retainer period is basically how long. It's so if you're familiar with how a listing agreement, like when you list a house or list a property, kind of like that, except for with the buyer side, of course. Typically, these go 3 to 6 months. In our company, that's pretty much where we stay, right in that wheelhouse. If it's a situation where you want to do longer, that's no problem. We can do up to 1 year. For instance, I work with a few investors and they're like, hey, I don't want to have to sign this every 3 months or whatever. Can we just do it as long as possible? No problem. We sign into a year. It also stays active in that entire time. So you decide, hey, I want to write an offer. It doesn't come together for whatever reason, didn't, too low, up against financing against cash or whatever it may be. That doesn't terminate this one. It just terminates the purchase contract. We'll talk about that as we go through it. But this one, typically, like I said, 3 to 6 months, no more than a year. And then at the bottom of each page, there's a place to acknowledge, basically saying you saw and understand, and we've given you informed consent of what you're signing. The next one is a protection period. This is basically like, don't backdoor us. Basically, if someone says, hey, I'm working as a buyer's representative, and they go to the seller directly and say, hey, fire your agent, I'll fire my agent. You reduce your listing price by this, and we both get a better deal. If we're procuring cause, whether that's on the listing side or the buyer side, we've entitled, and we have a lot of things that we're doing behind the scenes to prove our value and can increase your likelihood of a completed transaction. So we're going to have a protection period. Now, it's not just all encompassing. It does have to be said, okay, here's the properties I'm protecting in the case of a buyer, just like if a listing, here's the people we're protecting, that type of thing. If we get to that point, we'll explain that a little bit more in detail. Then the minimum requirements, and this is basically Iowa mandated law minimums. And if they're doing just the bare minimums, shame on them. But there are some things like we're going to seek information and work with counter offers and offers and contingencies, and showing you listed properties, in some cases unlisted properties, like we do unlisted properties as well. That goes beyond the state mandatory minimums, if you will. And then it goes on to talk about the obligations of the agent, and some of the things we do is helping you understand and accept offers and counter offers and work through all those contingencies, material adverse facts, stuff like that. And then it talks about your obligations, just work solely or exclusively in our case. Also, the work with us with communication, text messages, emails, documents, stuff like that, so that we can make sure the transaction moves as smoothly as possible for you. And then if there's a material fact, in the case of a buyer, most of the time that's like, hey, I lost my job. I'm not going to get approved for financing. Yeah, that's kind of a big deal. We need to know that so we can make sure we're informing people as we go in case a transaction is going to go south, if you will. Again, places initial. Then we get into some of your desired. Now, this could be very general or it could be very specific. I did one earlier this year that was just a one and done property specific showing. And after going through, the situation, and they're like, hey, we really like you. We want to continue to work with you. Great. Then we extend this and we take off the exclusive to that property and we kind of make it open to whatever market it may be in. I've seen some agents just put in here location Iowa, and because they're licensed in Iowa, they can basically work anywhere in Iowa. I typically will stay to an area or metro area that you're actually interested in. Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, metro areas, counties, any number of different things. And also types of properties, like we're looking for residential, we're looking for acreage, we're looking for, condos, whatever it may be. And then maybe get into some of the specifics, like we got to have 3 bedrooms. It's got to have a, 2-car garage, got to have a fence, or at least the ability to put a fence in. Those types of things might be things that we put in here. Is just kind of like for us to help get the start of the search going, so we can start eliminating some of those that may be not desirable for you. The next part is dual agency. Dual agency is something in Iowa it's perfectly legal to do as long as everybody's informed of what's going on during the process. In the event if it's dual agency, that means the brokerage and seller is representing the seller and the buyer, and it's dual. So we have to give informed consent of all the things that are going on during that. Seller signs off on it when they list the property. Buyer signs off on it when they purchase the property. And usually we can use a purchase contract to clearly explain that in more depth. And there's another form called dual agency form that helps explain it more in depth. And then the next part is competing buyers. It's a competitive market. There's other people that are out there that are going to be shopping with their agents, with us even. And in the event that they're working with us, there's certain things we can tell you. Yes, there's another offer. We can't tell you, though, what that offer's for financially, what their contingencies might be, like if they have to get financing or if they're paying cash, things like that. If it comes down to a situation like that, people can't help but ask, but just like you wouldn't want us telling about yours, we can't tell you about what they might be offering or whatever. Then the compensation. This is the one that scares most agents and buyers alike. In that, hey, what are we going to get paid? How are we going to get paid? Most of the time, it's still going to be business as usual, if you will. Now, it's definitely not the same as it used to be, but a lot of times we will be able to procure that amount from the seller. We do that with the offer, and it makes it pretty easy for them to understand, hey, okay, here's my bottom line. What's the net to the seller? And that's kind of the main thing, is what's the net. So in there, we usually have a number I'll just use an example, 3% is what we're charging. And we're going to go through all the process of doing these things. In the event that seller is just like, nope, not paying it whatsoever, not a huge problem. We can talk to you about how that'll work. In the years I've been using this, and I have been using the buyer agency agreement for years, I've only had a couple of occasions where they either weren't paying anything or they were paying less than it was, in our agreement. And we ended up making it work on everybody's was happy and everybody got paid and everybody got closed and everything like that. Ultimately, it breaks down to the net for the seller. So again, place to initial there. And then it goes on to disclosure of identity. Now, most of the time, with most people, they're buying this property for themselves, their house, or whatever. So your names are on the documents. Of course, that's the disclosure of identity. If you're buying it as an LLC or in a corporation or something like that, that's a little different thing, obviously. But that's very uncommon. And so the disclosure of identity isn't going to be, here's our client's name and all their information, how many kids they have and all that jazz. That doesn't matter. But we put your name on there, they're probably going to Google you or go to Facebook or whatever it is and maybe sleuth you a little bit. So those things happen. And then there goes into a little bit more about brokerage services. We're not tax advisors. We're not attorneys or structural engineers and things like that. And you might want to look for professional advice in the fields that you need, like inspectors is a very common one, or your financing, that type of thing. We can definitely give you some help with those things. We just aren't those people. So we can't wear our inspector hats and our realtor hats at the same time, too. So, and then documents and things like that, permission to disclose, share the documents, obviously, and complete forms and things that we're authorized to do by Iowa law. And then modification basically says we can't modify it unless you tell us to modify it and everybody acknowledges that it's been modified. So if you say, hey, counteroffer, it goes go back and forth. And by the time we're all done, we have one form that says counteroffers this, everybody cool, sign, things like that. We have electronic signature programs like this, DotLoop, DocuSign, SkySlope. They're all pretty much interchangeable names, but for you, it's how easy is it for us to make those modifications and make it quicker, faster, and easier. And then the communication agreement is obviously we do a good majority of this via email in the systems that I just mentioned, and that'll be the easiest and quickest way. Once in a while, you'll want to have a closing representative. We help hook you up with one that's local that we love to use. But you choose your own. If you decide, you know what, I like this one over here, or I want to use my attorney, no problem. That's all. Go for it. Then the disclosure of agreements, and that's basically this agreement. And we'll have some others as we go. There's one called agency, and in the event that that dual agency comes into play, those types of things will be the agreements. And then it goes on to the entire agreement, and that's basically, if it's real estate, there's no such thing as an oral agreement. It does mention it here, but everything to be binding needs to be in writing. So, and then the assignment, and this basically says that we may not assign or transfer it to somebody else. So it's this brokerage won't assign it to another brokerage, for instance. It's, you know what, we don't like working with you, or we don't like working with them. That just terminate that agreement, and then we sign a different one with somebody else. Okay. The severability basically means that unless there's court rules that there's a invalid or unenforceable thing, that the provisions are enforced, are limited, basically. Indemnification basically says that, hey, it's a hold harmless. If we fall because it's Iowa and we're out showing property, someone falls in their butt, it's an act of God, if you will, and not our fault, that type of stuff. And if the house that we're in, the ceiling fan falls off, it's not going to be our fault. Maybe that's something you have to take up with the seller or something like that. I'm not a lawyer, so I won't get into the depth of that as much. The remedies of the property, who does what, basically, the easiest way to explain this: seller keeps the house in the order, or property in the order it was when we made the offer on it. Buyer brings the money. So when it comes to disclosing information like that, material adverse facts, factual things about the house, the property, the condo, whatever it is that you might be buying, and then factual things about you, the buyer, which is where's the money, when's the money coming, and how's the money get there. That's really all that matters. Once in a while, people are like, "Oh, tell them about the kids and the dog and all this stuff and fuzzy wuzzies, if you will," and that's not really relevant to the transaction. And in some cases, we can't share those things because of violation of fair housing standards, familiar status, stuff like that, which is the next one. And that's basically that in the event that we treat basically everybody the same. It doesn't matter what race, color, creed, religion, that type of thing you are. You're protected by fair housing standards, and we're going to abide by them. And then everything in this is a legal document, a legal signature. So, and then the time and date and the signature, of course, that we're doing that. And I'll sign this as the broker, or the agent will as the representative. That is fine. And then there's a place to acknowledge at the bottom. So not overwhelming, not too hard, but it's one of those things we have to do now in order to make sure that we're giving you informed consent right from the jump before we show any properties. And yes, I've done these via Zoom and sent it to you digitally. I've done it in front of the house before we walked in and had to do it on the hood of a car or something like that. That's fine. We just want to make sure that you're well informed of everything that's going on, and that we can make it a great process for you, as smooth as possible, and get you moved. So let me know if you have any questions about that. this is one of many that we can go over the other documents other times. Just wanted to give you this one quickly. Make it a great day and have an awesome year.